Thank you for all the dads. Happy Father's Day, and thank you for the service you do for your family, your children, and your spouse, and for serving God. It's an important job that is sometimes made light of, I think, in today's society. That dads need to be involved and need to be the spiritual leaders of the house. That's not always happening today. So thank you for your willingness to do that and your desire to be at God's house this morning. So with that, we're studying about women this month. I thought it was real good timing. I think I should have moved it back a little bit on that. I'm not sure who planned that, but I'm sure it was a woman who laid this out. Just make sure make sure we focused on women during Father's Day month. No, this is a good series. And I love the lesson today. We're on session 3 of this. And by the way, Jason, thank you for last week filling in. Lynn and I had a very nice trip away. We just went up to Mount Pisgah and spent the night and went over to Biltmore after that stuff. So it was a really nice weekend. So thank you for giving us some time to get away. We got to celebrate our 30th anniversary, which was last Monday. So that was nice to get away and have some really good food while we were there. I can fill you in on that later. I got pictures of the food I can show you. Really good. Before we get so today we're actually going to talk about Hannah and talk about the faith that Hannah brings and the life she lived that we can take advantage of today to see what she did and how she handled herself and the prayers that she offered up and the faith that she had in those. So I'm going to focus a lot today on our prayer and on the faith in those prayers as we look through this lesson. But just some questions, we'll think of a little bit as we go through this, just off the cuff, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on this, but how much time do you think your average Christian spends in prayer each week?
Probably a lot less than what we should, of course, we know that.
Yeah.
I'd say probably not.
And I couldn't pull stats for hours of that or minutes, whatever it may be. I did get some stats though that was interesting. It come from the U.S. News and a BeliefNet survey. They went out and surveyed people who call themselves Christians. Now, I mean, anybody can call themselves Christian, right? So you got to take this. It is just a survey, but it says 75% of who they surveyed actually said they were Christian. 65% said they pray more than once a day, which is actually higher than I anticipated, honestly. 56% say they most often pray for family members, with 3.3% saying that they pray for strangers. 41% say their prayers are answered often. That was an interesting statistic to me, that 41% said their prayers were answered often. 1.5 said their prayers were never answered, which is interesting as well. 5% say they pray most often in a house of worship. That's not a big surprise. I think we spend a lot of time in prayer here, and sometimes that doesn't carry over into our homes or workplace, wherever it may be. 79% say they pray most often at home. And 67 say that in the past 6 months their prayers have been related to continually giving thanks to God. So interesting when I look through this, so if you look about between, I'll say 55 and probably 70% of the people pray somewhat often. That's good, we should be, but that seems like a low number, doesn't it? If you think about what God commands us to do, how do we communicate with God? Through prayer. So think about your friends. Think about acquaintances you've had over the years. If you don't talk to them in a while, is it awkward when you talk to them again? After the niceties are, hey, how you done? How you been? Da, da, da. Does it get awkward after that? It does, doesn't it? It's hard to have a really strong relationship with someone, including God, if we don't communicate. If we don't have that constant communication, we lose that personal connection that we need to have. And I think it's I think we do this a lot. I think we do this a lot. I think we struggle with this. When do we find ourselves praying most?
When we need Him.
Yeah. The wheels have come off something, hasn't it?
Well, if you go to the hospital, and it's not for me to condemn anybody, but the scripture says we are to examine the fruit. But go to the hospital, and you'll see people that any other time, they would never darken the doors of the church, and they would never mention the name of God.
Mm-hmm.
But let them get in a position where they're facing death or, major surgery. Then
Sure.
you see where their heart,
And I think we all do it to a degree, don't we?
Well,
Our prayer life picks up when we got things going on. When we're struggling, it picks up a lot.
You know the old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes.
that's right.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's a difference, Dave, between a Christian calling on the name of the Lord and someone who is not. John 9:31 says, God does not hear, He does not listen to
That's right.
the sinners, but He listens to the righteous man, the
Yes.
one who has accepted Christ. So there's a big difference.
There is. But we do fall in that same category many times, and that's the issue I see with a lot of times. And we all do it, right? We spend time in prayer. We pray for things. We've got our list. Now we've talked several times about our prayer, and we're not going to get into how we pray today because many times we do pray. If you're like me, I've mentioned before, I'm bad to da 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 da. God hears what da 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 da, and I rattle on. I don't do a lot of listening, which is a big part of what we have to do. But do you ever give up on God when you pray? And at one time, I would have said never. I never give up on God when I pray. There's been times I've given up. And I've said, God, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it. Now, I can tell you what happens after that is a mess ensues because now I'm doing it my way instead of God's way, and He's going to say, yeah, you go right ahead. Try and see what happens here. And He's not. I know God's not giving us that kind of attitude when He does have it, but He will let us have our way, right? I mean, we have free will to choose not to listen to Him, and sometimes our patience is not all it should be. And God doesn't say when you pray for something, I'm going to answer that in the next 5 minutes. He's going to answer all of our prayers. Our answer may be no, which we don't want to hear, or our answer may be to wait, which again we don't want to hear many times. So sometimes we get a little ahead of ourselves and we say, God, it's wasn't quick enough, so I'm gone. Here's what I'm going to do, and I want you to come along with me. And then when things get in a mess, we're like, well, God, why did you let this happen? And we get frustrated at Him when we're the ones caused it. So, it's prayer without faith. It's kind of useless, isn't it? Because we're not really given faith that God's going to answer those prayers. Really, we should give thanks to God while we're praying for something for His answers in that prayer. Because we know He's going to answer that prayer for us. It's not that if He's going to answer it, it's when He's going to answer it. So we can give thanks immediately, saying, thank you, God, for answering my prayers. Immediately, because we know He's going to do that. And we see it in our lives. We've all experienced it over the years, and we all have this doubt, but we all have various stages of faith, don't we? My faith is real strong if I'm praying for something and I can see responses. I can see where He's stepping in and doing things, and I can experience that. My faith is really strong then because it's happening right then. Our faith gets a little weaker when we're praying for something, and we're praying for something, and we're praying for something. It may go for years praying for something. Our faith begins to squander sometimes, doesn't it? It's like, I'm praying, but I really don't think God's going to answer this. And we don't like to talk about that because we know that's not the right answer. We know God's going to answer that, but our human side of us, His fleshly side of us, struggles with that a little bit. And we're like, if He was going to answer that, I would have already seen this in my life. I would have already understood this. And I've talked to people at work for, and we've talked about faith. And luckily, I work with folks that are good Christian folks, very active and very very faithful folks. So we do have a lot of discussion about church stuff like that. And It's a little unusual to be able to do it in a workplace. But we were talking about faith, and we were talking about when you're getting ready to pull out in front of a car coming up 11W, does it take faith to put your foot on that gas pedal and pull out and see what's going to happen? You're assuming that point. You're putting your faith that everything's going to work right. When you push that gas pedal, that wire that's going in and hitting that throttle body is going to move that thing open and going to let some gas fly in. And we don't understand how all that works. But we got faith that thing's going to get across that road in 0.2 seconds, because if we don't, we're going to get T-boned by somebody coming down the road because we've waited too late to pull out. but we won't out right then. It's easy for us to have faith in that because we've done it before, though, haven't we? We've experienced it. If I sit on this stool, I've got faith that's going to hold me up because I've done it time and time again. Now, Dickie in here, I'd love to write him a little bit more about this, because I sit in a fold-out chair one time at his house that I hadn't sit in before, and I sat down, and as I started sitting, I kept going down. I was flat pretty quickly. I found out that chair was not rated for me, and it folded up and real nice and flat by the time I was done with it. I told him, I said, I believe you set me up. He said, because he said, here, sit here. I'm like, yeah. He's over drilling holes in the side of her son before I sat down, I believe. It really wasn't me. But we learn with faith, or we gain faith through experience many times. And our faith in our prayer life gets stronger as we use it. And as we experience God's answered prayers. And many times we don't see it until later, do we? We don't understand until later why God answers something the way he answers it. Sometimes the answer is not what you want, and we don't understand it at the moment. And we may get frustrated, we may get mad at God. But there comes a time when you can look back and say, wow, I can see where God used this. And God made so many good things happen because of that I would have never chose for that to happen that way, because the discomfort it caused and the pain it caused during this period of time. But when we see that, it just makes it even stronger that, God, I trust you. When I'm praying, more now than I've ever been in my life, I feel like I can give it to God and say, God, you got this. And I'm better at saying that and then letting it go. And I may come back and pray for it multiple times, but I'm not praying about it saying, well, God, I'm going to pray about it again, because you probably forgot. Does God forget what we pray for? No. He doesn't get old like us. We was talking about earlier. He doesn't get old like us where we forget stuff. Every time, I walk into a room half the time at the house, and I'll stand there. It's like, I know I came in here for something, and I can't remember what it is. And I'll look at everything, hoping it'll trigger something. So I have to go back where I started from, and I'll stand there a minute and think, okay, I know what it was now. And I'll go back and do it again, and I can go right to it then. Luckily he's not like us, where we forget things quite often. But he tells us to pray without ceasing. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 says, pray without ceasing. He wants us to have a continual open line of prayer with him, to talk about things and to bring these things up again, and to because it helps us to show our faith. God, I trust you. I pray for you to do this. You're going to take care of it, and I give it to you to take care of it. But he knows the heart, doesn't he? If we're praying about something that we've already got the answer in our head, and we already know what we're going to do anyway, whether we pray about it or not, is God going to get to do a lot with that? No. We've already decided. He knows our heart. He knows what we're going to do already. And, I've caught myself doing it. God, I'd really like to have whatever this is. I'd really like to have this. Well, I've already got the plan of how I'm going to buy it, how I'm going to use it, all this kind of stuff already laid out. I'm just praying to say the words. It makes me feel better, I guess, that I've said the words. I've prayed about this. Well, I didn't really pray about it. I told God what I was going to do. Again, sometimes it turns out into a mess, and sometimes God will still use that, and he can still use us, even if we make a mess out of it. So today we're going to look at Hannah. And Hannah shows us a great example of this, because she's prayed for many years to have children. And God has not seen fit at this point for her to have children. But her faith stays intact as she does this. So let's read through, and I'm going to kind of read a couple of these and stop, and we'll talk, and then read a couple more because they leave out a lot of verses in between this. So after today or after this morning, go in and read the rest of this chapter because there's so much more that's filled in here through this. And I told Linda this morning I'll butcher these names as I read this because whatever reason, no one back then could name their sons Greg, John, Bill. It just didn't happen back then. I don't know why they had to have his names. So I will butcher them, but we'll get through it. Starting 1 Samuel 1, says, there was a man from Ramathaim Zophim, the hill country of Ephraim. His name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives, the first named Hannah, the second named Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. We skip down to verse 9. It says, on one occasion Hannah got up after they had ate and drank at Shiloh. The priest, Eli, was sitting on the chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Deeply hurt, Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept with many tears. Making a vow, she pleaded, Lord of armies, if you will take notice of your servant's affliction, remember and not forget me, and give your servant a son. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut. Now, let's stop right there just a second, because I want to talk how it come to this point. Hannah was the second wife, or she may have been the first wife of Elkanah. Elkanah had two wives, and I'm going to say Penny, to shorten her name, that's where I can pronounce it, not butcher her name every time I say it, had children. She had several children. Well, they went every year to the temple to give sacrifices and to pray. There was some jealousy going on here, okay? Peninnah had children, Hannah did not. Hannah wanted children so badly. She prayed constantly, the Lord would give her children, give her a son. And it was very important in those days because that was a lot of the self-worth of a woman in that day and time was to have children, especially a son, for their husband. And it was to carry on the family name. And they went through this, and she was praying, and she was praying. And Elkanah really loved Hannah. And it almost makes it sound like he loved her more than Peninnah. But the problem is when they go to the temple, he would give her meat to sacrifice and give Peninnah. Well, he gave her Peninnah more because she had children, as they did the sacrifice. And then it got to a point, there's this jealousy thing. If she felt like Hannah was loved more by her husband, how do you get back at someone? Use whatever you can against them, right? So she's taunting her, saying, I've got kids. I've got these kids. My kids are great. So she's rambling on about all the stuff. Her kids are wonderful. And you don't have any kids? Really? You don't have kids? Why don't you have kids? So she's pushing Hannah's buttons. She knows exactly what Hannah wants, and she knows how to push her buttons to get her upset. So Hannah's really shook up over all this. Now, we've all experienced something similar to that. Maybe not that exact same thing, but we've experienced times where people have got on and pushed our buttons. What do you want to do when somebody's pushing your buttons? Yeah, really, that's what you really want to do. Paul, do not push that woman's buttons. Paul come there, big eye out here one day. So know what happened.
We tried for 8 years. We tried for 8 years to have children, and Sam and I both played by the rules. Everything in our life went, this is when we get married, this is when we graduate school, everything, this is when we buy our home. We tried for children, we just figured, okay, we're going to have children, let's have children. But 8 years we tried, and people used to say, oh, don't worry, you'll get your gift from God, and our friends were getting pregnant. They're like, oh, don't worry. And one day my husband just had enough. He said, gift from God. He said, well, how about these people that abuse their gifts, and this person that gets a gift and they abort it, this person that gets a gift? He goes, I don't understand that. He said, you talk about the gift, he said, being blessed. He said, well, I prayed, and we prayed, but when we did have children, and we got Katie, and then Jackson, and my sister had 4 years left on this earth, and she said that joy, those were my grandchildren, because she said, I'll never see mine. And she said, and my mom said, you know, her focusing on Katie and Jackson, enjoying them, and my father-in-law had leukemia, enjoying them. If they hadn't come, I don't know how hard that time would have been, and the enjoyment she got, and the enjoyment my family got, and his family. So God knew what was best. But 8 years is a long time, and after expensive fertility treatments and failed attempts, and I'll never forget that time my husband, and the person didn't mean harm by it, but it just struck the wrong way, and he just sort of lost it. He said, how about, you know, he said, you think that's fair? He said, a gift? He said, it's a gift? He said, well, why is she getting a gift? Why is she getting a gift? And I'll never forget that. I was just like, I was thinking, you know, but he said verbally, and it's hard. You want to lash out, you can't, because they don't mean harm by it, but it was a hard time. But God, we got the biggest blessing ever, and so did my family. The timing was perfect, not for us.
Right.
You were not attending, but I remember when you were going to get Katie. I think our girls were in school at that time, but you were lifted up in prayer in our Sunday school class before you
I
got on
appreciate
that plane.
Yes.
Because I remember them saying that you all had been trying for years, and you were on the plane, and you were pregnant going to pick up Katie, and or sometime around in there, it was all happening. And remember someone saying, how blessed to get two blessings at the same time.
Within months of each other.
Yeah,
And
I remember that vividly from our Sunday school class.
we were so blessed, and talk about gifts, we got it. My sister, like I said, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer probably about a year after we got them, and she loves babies, and she spoiled them rotten and enjoyed them. And my father-in-law died not too long after my sister, and my father, the enjoyment, but my sister especially. Those are her grandchildren, she said. So if I'd had them the time I wanted them, it probably wouldn't have worked out as well.
Yeah. It's amazing to see, like I said, hindsight, isn't it? You see what God has really done. But going through that, it's hard to have patience. It's hard to have faith in God and saying, God, I know you're going to answer us when you want to, because we don't want that. We want to answer right now. That's just who we are. We're humans, and He knows that. We struggle, and we've talked several times in here about the struggle with the flesh, and we don't have a lot of patience. We want what we want, and we want God to answer prayers when we want Him to answer prayers. And I think that's a perfect example of very much what Hannah has gone through. I want to skip down. Let's go ahead and read 17 and 18 here. It says, Eli responded. Eli was a priest that was at the Shiloh. He was a priest at this temple. Eli responded, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant the request you have made at him. May your servant find favor with you. She replied. Then Hannah went on her way, and she ate and no longer looked despondent. So after she had prayed, and it was interesting. It's kind of funny, because I could see this happening today in a church. She was so distraught that she was weeping bitterly. She was crying out loud, and she was praying, but she wasn't saying anything, but her mouth was moving as she was praying. Well, if you're like me, I do that. Now, I know people think I'm crazy sometimes. They see me in my truck, because most of the time I'm really not talking to myself. Most of the time I say, I could be every now and then. But I pray out loud when I'm in the truck, or at least my mouth will move. And I know people, I work with people that I can see when they're reading something in a meeting or something like that. I look over and their mouth's moving while they're reading something on the screen or something. But her mouth was moving, so you could see that she was saying something, but she was so distraught. She was crying, she was wailing and all this stuff, because she was so desperate for this. And this years of Peninnah staying on her and giving her a hard time about this was just catching up, and she was so desperate for this. And Eli was sitting there at the, he's a priest at the doorpost. He goes over and says, you need to get out of here. We can't have you in here drunk. And he thought she was just totally drunk. And she said, no, I've not been drinking wine or beer. I'm not drunk. I'm just saying. She tells him the story. And she says what she said up here. If the Lord of armies will take notice of her servant, I'll give him back to God to use. Do we ever make deals with God in a time of desperation?
Yeah.
Do we often follow through with those deals that we make with God during a time of desperation?
He keeps his word, we don't keep ours.
Yeah. Afterwards, we think, well, God, I appreciate you doing that. It was a tough time, and you really don't want me to do that, do you? Whatever that was, she prayed a pretty tough prayer here. If you give me a son, I'll give him back to you, to use in your service. Not many people's going to keep that deal. After all those years, to get a son to say, I'm going to take him to the temple and I'm going to give him back to you and let you use him how you want to. Now that's tough. And we see a little bit later it does that, but it's so easy for us to do that. And we make these deals, we've all done it. And it's usually when we're really desperate and we're like, I'll do anything. Until it comes time to pay that debt. And it's like, we start squirming. We start squirming about it. And she didn't. She followed through with this. So let's go ahead and drop down verse 26, and then we'll read 26 and 20, and then we'll go ahead and read chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. It says, please, my Lord, she said, surely as you live, my Lord, I am the one who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this boy, since she was talking to Eli here. I prayed for this boy, and since the Lord gave me what I asked for, asked for, I now give the boy to the Lord. For as long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. Then he worshiped the Lord there. Verse 1 in chapter 2 says, Hannah prayed, my heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted up by the mouth. My mouth boasts over my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you, and there is no rock like our Lord, like our God. Do not boast so proudly, or let arrogant words come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and actions are weighed by him. She followed through. She took Samuel back to the temple after she had weaned him. Elkanah was going, during this time, Elkanah was going to the temple to worship, and was going to take her with him. She said, if it please you, she said, I want to stay behind with Samuel until I wean him. Then I'm going to take him to the temple and leave him in the Lord's service. Now, it's interesting here that she said that, and Elkanah's response was, okay, you made this promise. This is what we'll do. Now, that would be tough too, right? It's not just her now giving up her son. It's him giving up a son as well. But he realized she had made this promise to God that if you would give her this son, give them this son, that they would give him back to God. Now, I don't think this was a surprise to Elkanah. I think she was very open with him, saying, here's what I have prayed. But it took a lot of faith on both of them's part to turn around and give this back. Now, she was blessed with other sons and daughters after this time. After Samuel was the first born that she had. But she turned around and she followed through. That's tough. One, it shows faith that she had to pray to God. The other, she had faith to say, if you answer this prayer, I'm going to give it back, and then follow through with it. I tell you, I know I couldn't have done that. And unless the Lord just really got a hold of me and turned me inside out and probably handcuffed me and put me in a corner with tape over my mouth, is the only way I'd have been able to do that. Because that's your child that you're giving service. And you would only see that child as they went back to the temple, because the priest would then raise Samuel to be in the Lord's service. Now, there's a whole other story, and when you get in and read through Samuel, you'll understand, what the importance of Samuel being born was. He was the last of the judges that served in Israel. So he done some incredible things. But this is the beginning of where Samuel ended up, or where Samuel began his life. And it shows the faith that was in place and the prayers that were prayed to make that happen. It's much like what you're saying. You know, you pray and you pray and you pray, and it finally comes to pass. And later, when you look back, you think, wow, the timing was right for God. The timing was right. It's just not our timing many times. And I think that, you know, when you look at the crux of this lesson, what I get out of this, and I think what the author is trying to help us understand here, is that we do spend a lot of time in prayer, especially when things are tough. We spend a lot of time in prayer. Now, sometimes we're more apt to pray for the big things we are small things, aren't we? You know, I'm bad about the smaller stuff. You know, I don't know why. You know, I don't want to bother God or whatever it may be. I don't pray a lot over small things. I pray for the big things. I'm working on that, and I've gotten better at it over time, that I try to pray to God for everything, every decision I'm making, whether it's small or large in my eyes, I give it to God. But I still find myself struggling with that sometimes, and, you know, I'm really focused over here, and the small stuff, I'm just like, God, I'll handle all this stuff, and then I wonder why everything else is a mess but this, you know. But that's just, it's hard for us to turn everything over to God. But if we look at Hannah's life, the example she gave us, she was faithful over and over and over to pray, and she had faith that God would eventually answer that prayer. And she made a commitment to me during that time and followed through with it. The faith that she showed is the same faith that we need to have every day in what God can do in our lives. If you look at the things we do every day, when we go to work, do you have prayer before you go to work, or whatever you do during the day, that God will use you in that day? Because if you don't, we should. God put us here for a purpose. We're His children for a reason. He wants us to be used every day. He wants us to share His word every day. And it may be something very small. It may be something very large during that day. But I think we should pray that God, every single day, God, use me some way to further your kingdom today. And then be ready for that when it comes. Hannah prayed, and she prayed. And she was ready when that day came, that He answered that prayer, that she stepped into that door, and she followed through with what she was praying about. There's been several times I've prayed, God put somebody in my path today, and He did. And I said, yeah, it's not the right time. You know, I'll catch them later. You know, it's not a good time right now. You know, that opportunity passed. It was God's opportunity. He put in front of me to do that, and I walked off from it. We've got to be ready when we pray. God, will you please do this for me? Please give me this opportunity. Not to let it pass by. Be ready to do our part to say, if you do this for me, I will step in and I will do what you've asked me to do in this situation. It's so important. It's so important. And it becomes easier and easier and easier as we experience it, right? Our faith grows. Because we see where God has done these things, and we see when we step through those doors that He's prepared hearts already. And it could be something as simple as saying, you know, I just want to let you know I'm praying for you today. I don't know why. God just told me to say that to you. And I've done that to people. And I've had them come back later, really not say anything then. I've had them come back later and say, you don't know what that meant that day because I had this and this and this going on, and I couldn't even talk to you about it because I was so frustrated. And I needed that day. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea. You know, God just said do this. And many times that's what we've got to do. We've got to be ready to step up when God says, here's the door. Step in and say, God, I give it to you. There's a reason that He's opened that door for us. And He's going to prepare those people's hearts. And they may have something we'll never understand. We may never know. You may say to somebody and they turn around and say, oh, they may cuss you out and walk off. But we may have planted a seed that God wanted planted right then on that day. That someone else may plant another seed, and then someone else may harvest down the road. We never know. But I love the story of Hannah, that we can see that she had faith. over and over and over and said, God, just use me. Give me the power, and I will step in and do my part if you'll do this. I think that's what God asked us today. Just pray and be willing to step in and do your part. And he's going to bless us thousands fold over. And we're going to carry that through us. And as we do that, our faith is going to grow and grow and grow till we get closer and closer to God. Thank y'all for being here this morning. Hope you have a great Father's Day. Enjoy some good food and relax today. Or try to.